Hi, I'm Tate Robertson from Voyager, and I'm here to talk to you today about a cross-platform responsive messaging and call control app, which we just call Hero, and I'll call Hero for this presentation. So just a short rundown of the features that we've got in Hero so far. We have presence tracking, voicemail management and playback, instant messaging, phone management, which is do not disturb and call forwarding for the logged in user on Hero. On the right, we can see a screenshot of the app on a phone. I think it's an iPhone. And you can see under each user on the system their current presence, so available, offline. It can also be busy or in call. It's weird how it doesn't change at the same time. Okay, so this is the voicemail management screen, so you can listen to them and you can mark them as read or unread and delete them. We've got instant messaging, which is very cool. So that's an example chat, but that's a group chat between Cameron, Mark, our designer, and myself. You can send attachments. On mobile, we only support videos, images, and audio attachments. And on desktop, you can actually pretty much send any old thing, which is pretty cool. And so this, I'll talk about that later. And finally, the phone management, where do not disturb and call forwarding settings prominently displayed from within the app and available at all times. These are just for your user's extension, so it doesn't allow you to change the call forwarding or do not disturb settings of, say, a main company line as set up through Monster UI. So how did we do it? Well, it's quite a combination. We used Ember.js as our framework. So Ember.js is an open source JavaScript framework. I've just noticed they've released version 3.1, which I'm very excited for. And it basically lets you create single page web applications, which it means the URL changes, but the page doesn't actually refresh. And so everything's happening on a single page and you've got persistence, which is really nice. And the framework is simple and modular, which was really important to us because performance was key. So we wanted to be able to change things out we didn't want. We used the C Liberator, which is a library that we developed internally when we were conversant. This integrates with Kazoo. It's kind of an extension off of the Kazoo SDK in JavaScript. And we added support for calling through click-to-call and SIP.js. And it also handles authentication, which is quite nice, including renewing and making API calls. Thanks, Max. Finally, for the mobile support, we used Cordova. So Cordova was PhoneGap. Well, they're kind of two very similar projects. And it allows you to build iOS and Android apps from a JavaScript base, and then you can use plugins to use push notifications, geolocation, vibration, native phone features. So that's quite cool. We made customizations to Kazoo, specifically crossbar and black holes. So we developed our own endpoint called the Hero endpoint for crossbar, and that allows us to fetch bulk cacheable data. And so that meant it was much faster to start up, because before we did that, we were experiencing up to 10 seconds of load time as we made multiple requests to Kazoo. I don't know if you've ever watched the network tab when you turn Monster on, but it was quite similar, but to an even more extreme. And because we needed all the data basically instantly. So if we didn't make it all at once, it wasn't going to work. And then we changed Black Hole, which is Kazoo's WebSocket app, and we added a ping module to this to improve the reliability. And basically we use Black Hole to receive updates about the user document, which is good for location changes, copy, which you'll see later, a vast number of things we use Black Hole for, which is pretty cool. And we also used Mattermost, which is actually an open source chat platform that emulates Slack. So we've integrated via Mattermost's APIs. We created a Kazoo module for Mattermost integration that handles authentication, creating users on teams, and creating channels. That means it's more secure, and we can mold the way that we integrate with Mattermost to our needs, and we can also increase security so someone can't directly communicate with Mattermost effectively to kind of hack our app, I guess. And we use WebSockets again here to receive chat events and the like. And this also integrates with the status that I told you about earlier. So if your chat status changes on Mattermost, we receive updates about that and display it to the user as well. I think this is last. Yes, finally, we also made Navi and Mate. So Navi is a Kazoo app that allows for sending of push notifications. And we designed it because we tried to use Pusher, but we found it was basically non-functional, and it was built for a single purpose of sending call push notifications, whereas we actually wanted to send a vast variety of push notifications through Kazoo. So we wanted to be able to send the chat notifications, we wanted to send voicemail notifications. I think the important point here is that they were considered like user level push notifications, so we wanted to send them to a user, and Pusher didn't really have capacity to do these things. And then we also made Mate, which is another Kazoo app, and this one's specifically for Mattermost. So this kind of bridges the gap between Mattermost and Navi. So Mattermost sends us a whole bunch of Mattermost data for a push notification, and then Mate transforms that using the Kazoo data, so you can put, say, the user's username in place of the Mattermost ID, and yeah, it's pretty cool. It just forwards those messages onto Navi, which then sends them as a real push notification with user-readable data. So, extensibility. We designed Hero to be pretty extensible because we knew that once we made something like this, the first thing we're going to get asked from customers is, can we get it to do X, Y, or Z? And a lot of the times that X, Y, and Z might be very specific to them, so they would want that just for them. And we've actually implemented a few examples of doing exactly that just to prove the concept. So the first one was very simple, coffee. Our office really likes coffee. One of our sales managers, she actually makes everyone coffee each morning, and she was manually taking orders on a piece of paper, and then she was making the coffees and delivering them, or people around the office were coming to visit her in the kitchen and taking people their coffees. And I thought, well, this is really inefficient, and she was getting overwhelmed as our office was growing in size. So in Hero, you can now place an order for your coffee, which is received on a tablet in the kitchen that she has access to. She then makes the coffee, and when it's ready, she can push a button on the tablet, and a push notification will be sent to the person who ordered the coffee to let them know their coffee is ready to be picked up.
Common business life. That's awesome.
And so the next level after that, that was really simple. We went, we have an employee of the month system in our office, but it sucked. So there was now 100 employees in the office, and there was one employee each month who was winning employee of the month, and it was becoming really difficult to choose. Like, that's a big burden on our boss to have to pick between 100 people who's the best. There were nominations. So what Max and I built was Kudos. And Kudos allows everyone in the office to send each other points. So there's a limit of 100 points per person to send. You can only send them to other people. And you have to attach a reasonable message about why you're sending the points. And then those messages are displayed in real time on TVs in each of the office and within the Hero app. And all of the points are sent through Hero, and it controls how many points you're allowed to send and if you've sent too many and that kind of thing. So that's pretty cool. And everyone in the office is really enjoying that. So we had our first run of that last month, and it seems to have gone pretty well. So I'll talk about the challenges we've faced now. I won't talk about all of them.
Sorry, just before you go on, Tate, just go back to that previous slide. Just as an indication of how professional and what high standards these guys have, I wanted them to implement it on the blockchain because I thought we'd probably easily get 100 or 200 million if we did that. But they tried it out and said it was shit. And so instead of settling for $100 million, they decided to do it properly. And so that's why they're still working for Voyager. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, so on that note, we had actually, I implemented it entirely in the Ethereum blockchain, and it was just so slow. It was so impractical. There was no way. It was so expensive. It would have been so expensive, literally expensive. It would have been more expensive than the actual employee of the month system payout just to maintain the system. It was stupid. So, yeah. Anyway, the challenges. Ember comes packaged with a thing called Ember Data, which we haven't actually used much, but basically it was a nice way of persisting data to a database and using it seamlessly from the front end quite easily. However, because of Big Couch and it's schemaless, I think there's a typo there, don't look at that. Ember Data was not aware of the thought that anything could ever be schemaless, and so we had to replace Ember Data. Performance is really bad on Android. Well, we've done a lot of work to improve it, but Cordova is reasonably slow, and Android JavaScript performance is laughable. Compared to iOS, it's tragic. The latest Samsung phone compared to the oldest iPhone, so an iPhone SE versus the Samsung Galaxy S8, for example, the iPhone SE will walk all around the S8 while it's just sitting there spinning, loading the exact same content. And it seems that Apple had just worked out how to cache rendered web pages, whereas Android just re-render it every single time. And then Ember has poor list performance, and you might have noticed from the screenshots that a lot of the page, they're just lists of Kazoo objects, and then we use components for those, which are slow again. But we've worked quite hard on getting that performance up, so hopefully it's going to be better. Push notifications, I'm not even going to go into it. Dealing with Apple for push notifications is just like, we think 2600 hertz sometimes are a pain, but Apple are next level. Keeping up with Apple and Android as well is quite difficult. So there are regularly released new versions of Android and iOS. And then because we have the dependency of Cordova in the middle, it's not sufficient for us to purely work to maintain our code with the new things, because if Cordova doesn't keep up, then we have a problem as well. So we have to make sure that we're always running the latest betas and we're running the latest Cordova. And iOS especially is pretty ruthless when it comes to like, oh, well, that just doesn't work anymore. And that's like a lot of the time, and you have to work out how to get around it. And then the biggest thing definitely is Monster UI's coupling with Kazoo. So Monster UI should just be a view for Kazoo, but in many ways, Monster UI has made decisions that shape the way we use Kazoo, and we have to then replicate those decisions in any application that we want to develop for Kazoo. For example, the password reset, we've found it really difficult to, and we haven't been able to do this, put a password reset into Hero, because Monster UI has made a decision about the way that that should work and implemented it that way, and then Kazoo has been built to support that. Which means that another solution will require Kazoo development. The worst by far is the way that Smart PBX does groups and users. These have become kind of the way that our customers, I guess, and internally we think of groups and users. But actually, Monster UI is creating that representation of groups and users from a lot of API calls, and they're bundling all that data together and presenting it to you in one way. And so we had to basically copy that to make Hero fit the model that Monster UI has decided. So how do we resolve those? I guess I've already discussed it a bit, but for Ember Data, we discarded it, we took it out, and we don't use it, and we use the C Liberator, and we wrote our own custom serializer and cache for our Hero application. Performance, largely, we've decided to suck it up and optimize where possible. It is what it is. It's not terrible, but it's definitely never going to be as performant as a native app, which is a shame. And then iOS and Android, our solution is largely, use the beta where possible, buy many devices, because with Android, every device is different. Some of them will break, some of them won't with the same code, which is quite frustrating. And then we have to minimize our dependencies where possible, just so that the maintenance isn't such a burden on us. So where are we going next? Well, conferencing is on the horizon. We've done a lot of work towards integrating conferences with Hero. We've added a chat stream to conferences that is available through Hero. You can see the members of the conference, and if you're the administrator of the conference, you can lock the conference and you can perform actions on members of the conference who are in call. So you can see people who are just in the chat, but people who are in the call, you can actually perform actions like muting them, deafening them, kicking them from the call, which is pretty cool. We are, and also we're going to add events so you can see what's happening in the call in that chat feed, which is pretty cool. We're also working on calling to make Hero into a fully fledged soft phone. So on that note, big celebration yesterday. We had our first Hero call on iOS. It's still a long way off from being reliable, but it actually happened. And we had implemented it for Android and desktop using WebRTC, but iOS, it's difficult to explain. So there's iOS Safari, and then there's the iOS web view, and the iOS web view is like a cut down version of the iOS Safari. So iOS Safari supports WebRTC, but the iOS web view, which is what a Cordova application runs in, does not support WebRTC, and there is no ETA for that support. As a result, we've had to think about around that and work out another solution. And we also, even if WebRTC had worked, there's no reliable way to receive the calls when the app is closed or in the background. And so in order to achieve our dreams, we actually need a native solution. Currently, there is no Cordova plugin that supports that, although there are a few that are in works. So what we've done is we've actually tested a native calling framework called Apto's SIP SDK, and it was pretty dang good. So we got in touch with the people who made that, and we commissioned them to make us a Cordova plugin that integrates with their calling framework and has support for PushKit, which is the iOS solution to waking the app when it is dead or in the background, and a background service added for Android, which is similar. This would basically allow the app to be closed, the phone locked, and a call to come in and still be received on the device. The app would wake up, the call would come in, and you'd be able to answer it and use the app, which is really cool. And we intend to open source this Cordova plugin. However, the actual Apto framework is a paid product. So if anyone wishes to use it, they'll have to buy that framework. In the further future, so those are the things we're working on right now, we're looking at adding a reception console and call control features to Hero. And that would be on the desktop version of Hero, which we also intend to work towards. We'd like to add video calling and video conferencing. We had previously tried to add video conferencing with Jitsi. However, that requires WebRTC. So it was a no-go for iOS. And that's all.
All right, so who's going to rush up to the microphone first?
You are.
Sounds like you.
Okay, so I have a novel of questions for you.
Good.
First of all, congratulations. That is a lot of very amazing work you guys have done.
Thanks.
So I'm going to start chronologically as I was taking notes. So you've touched on this a little bit, but when you picked Ember and Cordova or any of the other libraries, did you make these choices after just like had you worked with these pieces of tech before, or did you evaluate a bunch of them and then pick them? And then I guess conversely, did you have any failures with others that you had tried, and would you pick them again?
That's a really good question. So we'd only had experience before we started this with Angular, and that was just Max. He'd used Angular, and we went into it and we looked at all the frameworks that were available at the time. So we started over a year ago now, I think. So we looked at Angular, we looked at React, we looked at React Native, we looked at, what's the other one called? Vue? Was it Vue? There was a few anyway. So, and also Ember, of course. And Ember really appealed to us the most. It looked like it was the most performant. It was open sourced, and it had, I think they're all open sourced in some sense, but it had a lot of active development happening on it at the time. It was relatively new. And the biggest contender, we didn't really consider Angular that much, but the biggest contender was probably React and React Native. But when we investigated those, we found that we wanted to support desktop and the devices with the same code base. And so you could either use React Native or React was the way that I interpreted that. And React Native was supporting mobile devices, while React was kind of the desktop application. And so at the end of the day, and that was the competition, I guess, with Cordova as well. And at that time, something like Flutter didn't exist yet. And so at the end of the day, we looked at all of our options. We tried implementing a few things in React, and Ember was the one that came to us most naturally, and Cordova was the easiest to set up and get working by quite a lot. And so I guess that was how we ended up making that decision. And once we'd made it, we just kept going, and we kept finding things to be relatively easy to do to what we'd experienced before. The Ember framework is really nice to use. It makes a lot of sense. And the biggest complaint we had was Ember data, which was stupid. So we just took it out, and it was pretty easy to do that as well, which is really cool when you find that. And Cordova is an age technology. If we were to start again now, I think we would definitely use Flutter instead. I've been looking into that a lot, and it's really exciting. But at the time, this was the best option, I think.
Got it.
My 2 cents on that. We had a lot of debate, the three of us, about this. And I was probably leaning towards React. The thing I liked about Ember was it was very opinionated. So there was the Ember way to do things, and that I think leads to a bit of discipline. React, I think, is more a collection of. It doesn't really. I think it's a smaller set of things, if that makes sense, and so you then kind of add all the things on that you want, and so it kind of potentially can be a bit of a mishmash. But I wouldn't say we're experts in the frameworks at all, but Ember seemed to be the most opinionated and of them all.
I have a question. So hi Ted. First of all, that is a very awesome job that you right there. I just want to ask about Navi application that can be potentially replacing pusher application. Can we use that? Can we use that for all other application, or is it just created specific for a Hero application?
I'll let Max answer that, as Max actually wrote Navi.
Some of it. So we created Navi a while back and tried to submit it back to 2600 Hertz, who basically said that Pusher already existed and they liked that. But actually that turned out to be quite a good thing, because once we started using our original version of Navi, it was quite buggy. But I think we've resolved most of that. So now it's just, we need to talk more to 2600 Hertz about what they want. And they seem to like Pusher, but maybe we just call Navi Pusher and take Pusher's functionality and push it back in. But yes, the idea is it should be quite easy for people to write. Take Kazoo events and push them out as push notifications to users.
So just to kind of add something to that, Pusher does calls, Navi doesn't do calls. Pusher didn't work in 4.1 and it works in 4.2. Navi will be submitted to the OTF repo and currently supports, I think we only do voicemail, is that right at the moment?
Yes, we do voicemail, we do messages from Nate, and we have a bit of a mishmash with Pusher. We actually send Pusher events out through Navi.
Yeah, so we've got Pusher sending events to Navi, so it's doing all the push notifications. But the idea is, ideally you'd have that all in one code base. So whether we get to that or not, we use Pusher to wake the phone on an inbound call. But we send chat notifications, which probably wouldn't be relevant to most people unless somehow they do this whole thing. But voicemail notifications through Navi.
So I've got a question on this as well. Like with Pusher, you have to have at least a registration once coming in just to get the device ID and actually know what to send where. How's it handled in Navi then?
So we have a new API endpoint called CV Push Notification Subscriptions. And basically you create a subscription for your device for a specific user, which is the user that you're authed as. So then that device is basically assigned to that user. And when you want to send a push notification to a user, you look at all the mobile devices that are assigned to it and send out your push notifications.
Okay, that's all. That will all be part of the new app you guys will be putting in the OTF repo.
Yeah.
Depends what you mean by that.
All of that back.
So Navi, Mate, Crossbar, endpoints, yes, they'll all be pushed to OTF. This application, it won't go to the OTF. I don't know how I would like us to be able to kind of collaborate on it, but at the same time we need to kind of recognize the effort that we've put in and you know, we have competitors as well in our market. So I don't know how we deal with that, but certainly any of the core kind of infrastructure, like, you know, the Adto Cordova SIP SDK, the Cordova plugin, and any of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just this stuff, Navi is that's awesome.
Yeah.
And we need to send like push messages, but we don't use calling and we have mobile integration. So
yeah,
I would just like to enrich it, but not having call functionality actually.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Thanks.
Nice work.
Dayton, you had some more questions?
Yeah, I do. So the other question I have is, are you guys sharing any of this or selling it or licensing it or letting people help you build it or anything?
Potentially all of the above. You know, I just don't know. I'm happy to talk to anyone and everyone about that and try and figure out. You know, the thing about building a large application like this is, you know, it creates a lot of ongoing maintenance. So I'm wary about that. But like I say, on the other side, you know, because there's been such a lot of effort and we don't necessarily want some people getting it for free who might compete with us. it's a balancing act. So happy to talk about that.
Sure.
separately.
Yeah, let's do that. Because again, I mean, some of the stuff for sure is it's your special sauce. It's how you sell. It's how you stay competitive. And whether or not it's that we could, you know, look at splitting apart the underlying technology from the front end, or, you know, conjuring up terms that require it to look significantly different, or something. Again, what I think that we can all agree on is eventually everything becomes table stakes, and we all eventually suffer by implementing something like this that finally gets you across that finish line of like, cool, we finally have like chat and presence and phone calling in one app. But when we have to recreate the stuff that today is close to and eventually definitely will become like baseline table stakes, we end up with 5 versions of the same sort of first stepping stone. And if we can somehow work together to work alongside the same sort of base technologies, I think it might help everybody. Like, I think, for example, the Mattermost Kazoo module, or the ways to interact with that could be an interesting thing to consider a baseline technology. But let's talk about it some more separately. My 2 big questions that are left. One of them was just, how has Black Hole been for you, and how scary is it to have events going across it at load? And the Kudos and the Coffee app, if please share those. Those are so cool, and they're definitely something that you would use internally as opposed to selling, most likely. But like we've had conversations about this stuff, like how do we track recognition? The Kudos app especially, how do you track recognition? How do you give people props? We do it in our all hands meetings, but it's becoming very difficult to like not only measure who's giving it, who gives feedback or recognition at all, and for what items are people being recognized for, and how do you make sure that those are in line with, say, the culture you're trying to uphold or the core values you're trying to uphold. But anyway, yeah, Black Hole and that thing.
I possibly could answer the Black Hole is that we literally released this application on Monday, and let's see what happens.
I will let you crash first.
Yeah, we're doing all the hard yards.
You're still here, Cameron.
Well, I am here. That's right. I may stay here.
For now, it's okay.
Yeah, that's right. Do you have any thoughts on Black Hole, Max?
I mean, I've played around with it quite a lot. I don't think it's great, but it does work, and I've done a bit of load testing myself, and it seems to work fine. We've got the whole office on it.
That's actually our biggest customer now, 100 seats.
And so they're maintaining Black Hole connections, listening to every event that happens on the account, basically. Well, every relevant event. And they're also constantly pinging it. So we found that basically with WebSockets and Kazoo, you couldn't really be sure that the WebSocket was still active. So the way we had this is basically every, I think it's 10 seconds, each client will send a ping to Black Hole, and Black Hole will just reply straight away with a pong to say that, yep, the connection's still up, and if it's not, then we just create a new one. And I mean, that makes a mess of our logs. There's a lot of stuff in there, but Black Hole still seems to be working okay. So we'll see what happens.
Sorry, we put Black Hole on basically on the same servers as the APIs, right?
Yeah.
So all the calling stuff is on separate servers, and then we've got HA proxy in front of Black Hole with unicast kind of in case things go wrong. So one thing we have noticed is that Camellia and WebSockets don't play very well, and I don't know if that's a Kamailio thing or just a Kazoo configuration. So we run out of WebSockets on Kamailio very quickly. That's something we have to figure out a solution for. But in terms of events out of WebSocket events out of Black Hole, seems to be fine.
I'll give a demo of Kudos if you want to see. I've got it up here somewhere.
Did you have another question, Dayton, while he's doing that?
Let me check, but I don't think so.
You had two questions in that. One was
the second one was just like Kudos and Coffee are effectively a module within Hero. Is that right?
Yeah, so I've got it up here, so you can see we've got Kudos. So on the desktop, which hasn't been released, but you can see that there's kind of the modules. So you got your users, your chat, your conferences, your call logs, your voicemail, your calling, and then Coffee is just a form, so they get submitted. They're not hacks, but the Coffee system actually just sends a coffee emoji through the chat as the way of sending the coffee, and we just save the coffee order in the user's preferences. So it remembers what coffee I like. So if I change that to, it remembers I like long blacks, for example. And then this is the Kudos screen on desktop. And so you can see I've got 40 points remaining. I've received 5, and there's our list with the comments. And so this is our top list as well. We don't really want this to be like the top list, but it was the quickest thing that I could throw together to fill that space. So you can see at the moment that Yang is winning. And then say if I went down to find Max, he's not even...
Surely you've got
Is there a negative?
Wow, that...
Take Kudos away.
So we'll see Max 5 points. Great presentation on EDR and Sphere this morning.
Thanks, Dave.
No worries, Max. And it will ask and I can send Max 5 points. And now the whole office has just received push notification that Max received 5 points. And on the TV screens in each office, they've been updated.
Yep, it's there.
And you can see that Max is now appearing on our top list here. The other cool thing, which I think I'll just show off, is you can actually do statistics so we'll take, say, last month. And
what did you build this in? Like, what's behind all that?
Don't ask.
No, it's chat.
All right.
It's all done through the chat. Because the chat is basically a chain, right? And we don't enable editing.
It's $100 million blockchain.
Yeah. It's a $100 million blockchain. And so anyway, the statistics, you can see how many transactions have occurred. You can see how many points have been sent, how many replies. People don't really understand the reply in our office, so we've had 9 of those. You can see who sent the most points. It's pretty cool. And it's all, so this is actually just a chat feed, and then we use regex on the messages to detect what type of message it is. And then there's an end of period method to shut it down and reset all the points. And then on the client side, it basically passes all the messages and adds everything up, adds all the transactions up. And this is actually quite cool for security as well, because it means that every client is actually calculating in real time whether or not the transaction someone sent conform to the rules, which are stored in the Kazoo database in a non-editable document.
Right. Yeah. No, this is awesome.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you have like finger wag or
name? Do it, Dave.
Shame someone?
Oh, hang on. Yeah, we do. Hang on. Here's this. Max
Watch
so
it.
if you send negative, it turns into poo. And you can send poodos. So if we send it says, whoops. And I said, are you sure you want to send poodos to Matt?
Kudos.
Nice try.
And I even invented my own Torrio translation for poodos. So it's all translated into Māori.
Thank you.
and you can send Crapamiha.
Nice.
I think that's what you should have called it at the beginning.
I like it.
Instead of kudos.
Oh my
Kudos,
God.
crap and me ass. I like that.
Oh my God.
That's great.
Scheisse.
Oh yeah, actually, what? Yeah, that's it.
That's super awesome, though, guys.
Any other questions?
I went, why do you suppose German in there?
Because Mark Loss, who's there, he's a designer. He speaks German, so it was easy for him to do that.
That's great.
So if you want to submit a French one,
Definitely, I'll do one.
Oh man.
I have a quick question about WebRTC calls. Are you supporting forward error correction Opus? Or have you thought about Opus?
We use Opus, yes.
Okay, is it
We found
go
We
ahead.
found Opus to be the best codec to use for WebRTC.
And is
It works on Android and desktop, the Opus, for WebRTC. But at the end of the day, we're only going to use WebRTC for the desktop calling.
Until
Wait.
iOS WebKit gets around to
well, we just plan to use a native
WebKit,
SDK.
excuse me.
Because well, from what I've seen, WebRTC is never going to give you the same experience as a native app. Just with the background and having that application on the mobile. Yeah. In terms of forward error correction, I have no idea. Do you know, Max?
Nope. We use Opus.
you're piping Opus directly from FreeSwitch, right? So
It's just
it's
it's just whatever. Yeah.
I don't think it's on yet, but it's something we should turn on for those of us doing calls over Wi-Fi.
Okay.
We should find a way. I'll look into it.
Cool.
Cool.
Anything else?
Kudos.
Okay. I'll